Hey guys, how's everyone doing? Welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. As you know, this is a place where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain what is most factual and logically consistent. So today we're going to be covering something. Ben Shapiro, you know, coming to the most obvious realization, which is the fact that Trump is corrupt. I don't think there's a much more self-unaware person as Ben Shapiro. He's like the most self-unaware person in existence, and he's been getting a lot of flack in his own in his own comment section. Whenever I put out a video, they always comments bashing him. But dude, he just keeps going. Because he really doesn't care. He doesn't care about what people say. I don't think he even gets to read his comment section. But he's been eaten alive over and over and over and over and over and over again. Anyway, Ben Shapiro did an interview of late, and the interview getting out this information out of Ben Shapiro, trying to ascertain his feelings about Donald Trump, considering all that's happened. And Ben Shapiro finally admits that Trump is corrupt. However, despite that admittance, despite that understanding, despite that knowledge, like all conservatives, they'll eat shit and they'll say it's shit, but they'll eat Trump's shit. They'll say it's shit, but they'll keep eating it. So nothing really changed despite his admission that Trump is corrupt. So a very good job of so I'm going to be analyzing of this situation. So let's go.
In a recent interview, which is equal parts revealing and infuriating, Ben Shapiro, legendary conservative commentator, Daily Wire founder, OG right-wing debate bro, and self-professed principled conservative, finally admitted that
Ben Shapiro isn't legendary in anything. He's only legendary in two things: BS, bullshit. That's what he's legendary in. There's nothing legendary about what he does. He's not a skilled debater. He goes to college. He goes to colleges to just try to intimidate kids, and many of them they're even smarter than he is. So I don't buy any of those titles.
Donald Trump is, quote, obviously corrupt. And even though he concedes that, quote, things can get worse under Donald Trump, he nevertheless stands by his support of a man whom he once publicly committed to never supporting, sacrificing principle on the altar of political expedience. And we have to talk about
never had any principle. He never had any principle to begin with. None.
But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go.
Yeah, please do that to Pondering Politics and also to this channel.
All right, folks. Ben Shapiro is a legendary right-wing name.
No, he's not.
Even though I would argue, and I'm sure many would argue, that his influence has waned in the face of more right-wing populists like Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, because that's the only way to be sustainable in the right. You have to be the most unhinged person because they are crazy. So if you try to moderate your stance, you're going to be left behind. That's why they have to be increasing their rhetoric. They have to be as toxic as possible just to maintain their audience. And that is part of why Ben Shapiro is failing, apart from the obvious Israel stuff. The fact that at times he tries to be a little bit reasonable, not totally reasonable. He hasn't gone 100% white nationalist, fascist like Nick Fuentes, which is what they really like. But that's what happens. If you don't do that, you lose the audience.
Charlie Kirk, even. Ben Shapiro has been actually fighting a high-profile public war for the soul and spirit of the Republican Party. And I think it's safe to say that he's been losing, okay?
He'll lose. He'll lose. And he should lose. And the Republican Party should lose. Because at this point, it's almost like there's nothing redeemable about that party. The party that has let Trump just run amok, do whatever he wants to do, damage the reputation of the US, kill people.
So argue that his own decisions have contributed to that loss because he has sacrificed his principle for the sake of political expedience. We'll get into all of that.
What principle? I don't think Ben Shapiro had any principle to begin with.
One of the things that has distinguished Shapiro from somebody like some of his Daily Wire co-hosts like Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles is that he is and continues to be willing to criticize Donald Trump.
To what extent? To what end, really? Criticizing Donald Trump without, taking action, without, it's not substantive. It's a veneer, an air of, how would I put it, trying to look as if you are balanced, which is not. He's trying to look authentic. Oh, I can still criticize my side, but nothing comes out of it because the next minute he's defending what Trump is doing.
Just not enough to stop supporting him. As I pointed out on Twitter, at Ben Shapiro finally admits,
if your critique of Donald Trump doesn't get you to the point where you stop supporting him, then you haven't really done anything. I mean, I used to be the biggest fan of Donald Trump. I actually blocked someone on Discord because he kept calling Trump Trump. I found it offensive. I told him to stop multiple times. He did not, and I blocked him. Now looking back, I'm like, okay, maybe this guy was right. Calling Trump that name seemed offensive to me. Maybe it was. So even if someone like me can break away from all that, Ben Shapiro, but obviously he's not going to. So his critique, counts for nothing.
However reluctantly, that Trump is corrupt, and he still supports him. And this is in reference to an interview that Shapiro had with the New Yorker magazine, specifically David Remnick, okay? Now, it is a fascinating profile, and the thing here is actually like transcribed. It's a relatively abridged transcription, but thankfully, they also included the audio version of the interview. And I want to play 3 specific sections which deal with Shapiro's take on Trump and why he supports Trump and the issues with the Democratic Party. And we're going to unpack them together. But I want to start with this because it's relatively early in the interview where Remnick confronts Ben Shapiro about
these critiques by right-wingers is that it's never about the person. They will never tell you that I like this person because of this. They will always say it in opposition to the Democrats. They don't have any positive value. They don't have any vision. They're just there to be the opposition. And even though they're in power, they're still acting like the opposition because they stand for nothing but to complain. They're the biggest babies.
Trump, and specifically Trump's corruption. So let's take a look.
People have termed that taco, right? Trump always chickens out. I don't think that's right. I think that President Trump is a person who is willing to try different things and then will shift on a dime.
You think he's honest?
As things are working.
Do you think Trump is honest?
In some ways, yes.
Anyone who says Trump is honest just has their credibility totally ruined from the get-go. Trump is honest? How?
In some ways, no.
There was an article in the Wall Street Journal just a couple of days ago, being the from Abu Dhabi into the Trump family. Our reporter, David Kirkpatrick, who's extremely conservative in his calculations about how he's assessing this, has said that the Trump family has enriched itself to the tune of $4 billion since taking office again in 2024. Does this concern you at all?
Of course. I mean, I've been calling this.
Now, to many right-wingers, it wouldn't concern them because this came up in a conversation in one of my videos, and a guy was just, having a back and forth, and he was like, how has Trump enriched himself? When I pointed it out how Trump enriched himself, you know what I said? He said, he said, I just created a CV for Donald Trump. I'm like, really? Yeah, I did create a CV for him, for a shitty, corrupt person. So you see all the corruption and they don't care. They look at all the corruption and they say this guy is smart.
Or pretty much anybody else. I mean, early on in the Trump administration, when World Liberty Financial was pretty clearly making a fair bit of money over in the Middle East, I asked on my show consistently about how I thought this was wrong. If the name were Biden and instead of Trump, people would be screaming bloody murder. and how this was not beneficial to President Trump's agenda either. So sure, that
Well, not
conservative
beneficial
aspect-
to his-
So not that this was harming America. This is not beneficial to his agenda. So you're still making it about him. It's not that it's affecting the country, impacting the country negatively. You're still making it about him. So if it wasn't impacting Trump's agenda, it would be totally fine for him to carry on with his corruption. That's what you're saying. You see why his alleged critique of Donald Trump, really makes no sense. It holds no water, serves no purpose.
So I'll stop right there for just a second. Shapiro is acknowledging that there is a willful, deliberate blindness to Trump's corruption by the right. He just gave the game away. He just said, if the name were Biden, the right would be screaming bloody murder. So it's not that they're totally oblivious of this. Now, millions of Americans, I think, are siloed off of this information.
They're not oblivious, they just don't care.
We've been discussing in multiple recent videos how Fox News, for example, the biggest mainstream news network by far, is deliberately refusing to report on this bombshell Wall Street Journal report that David Remnick, references. And the Wall Street Journal being a cousin of Fox News. It's a conservative publication owned by Rupert Murdoch, and they're deliberately refusing to talk about it. So there is no doubt that millions of Americans are furiously, it's infuriating, they're unaware of Trump's corruption. But Shapiro acknowledges that his peers, be it Fox News or Matt Walsh or Michael Knowles or others, are deliberately tolerating or even celebrating what Trump is doing because it's Trump and not Biden.
Exactly.
And it is true that he has, on his show, thrown up some red flags, and it's called, we've talked about it in recent videos and previous videos. But is Ben Shapiro emphasizing this to the same extent that he would if it were Biden? Is Ben Shapiro giving this the commensurate level of support and outrage he would if the shoe were on the other foot? Or is he doing just better than
He isn't even doing anything. It only brought it up, or it only came up because he was asked about it in this interview. I don't think you'd find him in his shows, any of his shows, saying things that are that critical of Donald Trump, specifically on this point of corruption. You're not going to find him do any of that. So he only brought it up because he wants to seem as though he's an objective person, someone in the middle who can criticize his side.
And even there, the kind of tepid language at the end, well, it's not beneficial to Trump's agenda. Maybe not his political agenda, but maybe that's not his goal. Maybe his goal isn't to be a good political leader, shit ton of money, and insulate himself from legal liability.
Agenda or corrupt?
Both, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that if you are taking, what I perceive to be digital assets that are not particularly worthwhile, and then you have people who are politically interested investing massive amounts of money into those things. That is
talking about
that is not a good thing.
Cryptocurrency,
he said,
pool scam. And the thing is, no matter how much Rob scams his supporters, they're still going to fall for him. They're just suckers. They are just suckers. He'll keep scamming them, and they'll fall for it. How can the president of release a coin, a Bitcoin, a cryptocurrency, have been inaugurated? This is crazy.
Obviously, both. Obviously corrupt. He is acknowledging that Donald Trump is obviously corrupt, and yet he supports him anyway. Let's continue.
Voted for him the second
So
time?
what does that tell you about Ben Shapiro? If he's willing to support a corrupt person, then he is corrupt himself, because birds of a feather flock together.
I voted for him in 2020, and then I campaigned for him in 2024.
Why?
Because it was now a binary choice between Trump and Kamala Harris. And I liked a lot of what he did during his first administration. I felt the guardrails would largely hold, which I believe they have with regard to President Trump. I know many on the left believe they've not.
So by what Ben Shapiro is saying, you could literally bring a madman and make him president of the US because you believe the institutions are going to check him. That's your reasoning for voting in a madman. You felt the guardrails were going to hold. The only reason why the guardrails would even be invoked in the first place if someone is trying to test those guardrails, which Donald Trump did. So does it make sense to admit this, to say you felt however crazy Trump gets that the guardrails are going to hold? What makes you think it's going to hold? Held? Because democracy is, it's an understanding between people, between the rulers and the ruled, that we're going to be civil, we're going to obey the laws. If the rulers decide to ignore the laws, there is nothing the people can do. And you've seen that right now in the US. There's nothing, nobody can do anything. Trump is being a dictator. He's doing whatever the hell he wants. So the so-called guardrails that Ben Shapiro is saying is holding is actually not holding.
What I
You
would say
believe
is
the
that
guardrails have held this time?
yes, I'm hard pressed to
Help
see.
me on that, Ben.
Sure. So
Because I don't see it even remotely the case. So let me hear your point of view on that.
sure. So the Trump administration has not bucked the judiciary to the tune of simply saying that if an appellate court or the Supreme Court rules in a particular way, they will just go ahead and do whatever it is that
Really?
they
Where
want to
have
do.
you been in all of these deportations that Trump is doing, where the Supreme Court or courts, judges have ruled that a particular person should not be taken out of the country, or they should be brought back, and Trump just flat out ignored all that? That is, you see, it's reminiscent of what happens in very corrupt African countries. That's what happens, where the executive flat out ignores the judiciary. Welcome, America, you're now a third world country.
That's not true. Use the TikTok ban as an example. That was signed into law by President Biden with overwhelming bipartisan congressional majorities. It was upheld 9-0 in the Supreme Court. They said, yes, this is good law. Whoever the president is, including Donald Trump, needs to enforce it. And Trump defied that court order for a year. When Kilmar Abrego Garcia was wrongfully extradited to El Salvador, the Supreme Court says you need to facilitate his return. And Trump took his dandy time with that. He openly defied them along the way before eventually complying. I mean, Jesus, imagine the Supreme Court telling President Biden, for example, one of the things that Ben Shapiro famously said about Joe Biden, he's like, gang, Joe Biden's just as much of a threat to democracy as Donald Trump. I mean, because Jesus, he tried to enforce a vaccine mandate. He tried to create a vaccine mandate using the Department of Labor.
What vaccine mandate? The vaccine mandate decided under Donald Trump. These people are so willfully ignorant. They are going to excuse the same being done by Donald Trump. They're going to turn a blind eye to it, and nothing to see here. These people, they're so mad about the vaccine. They rally against the vaccine. Vaccines that were literally done under Trump's administration. All those mandates, everything started under Donald Trump. Trump is proud of the vaccine, but they're never going to hold him accountable for anything. Even now with the Epstein files, with his name being mentioned, they'll skirt around, they'll dance around the fact that Donald Trump is there. They're not going to mention him. They're going to use the Epstein files to create more of these people that they don't like, not minding the fact that Donald Trump, who they support, is mentioned there thousands of times. They're never going to make any allusion to the fact that Donald Trump might be guilty. No, he's going to be exempt.
And using, so let's just run a counterfactual. That mandate was never implemented. It was legally challenged. It was never enforced. And once the Supreme Court struck it down, Biden scrapped it. That thing ever enforced. And by the way, it wasn't a vaccine mandate. It was you either need to get vaccinated if you have more than 100 employees, or there needs to be regular testing of your employees, or if you refuse to do either of those things, then yes, you'll pay a fee. Again, it was never enforced, but let's set that aside. Let's imagine the Supreme Court, which they did, strike it down, and Biden says, you know what, for the next year or so, I'm just going to ignore that court order and we're going to enforce it anyway. Eventually, we'll stop. Like Trump did. Eventually, I will comply, but not immediately, and I'm going to drag it out for a year. Would Ben Shapiro say, oh, Biden didn't defy the Supreme Court. He eventually complied, and that's really what counts? No, of course. This is what I mean, where Shapiro is still full of shit. But let's continue.
Yeah, his name is literally BS. Full of so much shit.
Legal authority for the things that he is doing.
So you're confident that the Justice Department will pursue corruption charge family because it's independent?
I'm confident that the president will likely pardon his children in the same way that Joe Biden did on his
So
way
why
out.
would he have to pardon himself if he's not guilty of anything?
Joe Biden didn't pardon himself. Joe Biden pardoned his son Hunter and members of his family, yes. And by the way, that was condemned by many people in the Democratic
Rightly
Party.
so.
But the reason that Biden pardoned Hunter Biden and his brother is because the Republicans made it clear over the past 2 years that there would be a witch hunt against them. And again, the Democrats condemned Biden's pardon. But see how Shapiro's laughing about that? Now, actually, Trump's going to go one further and pardon himself.
I think
But
that
you're
one
laughing, but that's radically corrupt, is it not?
again, I think that it was radically corrupt when the DOJ did not pursue, with alacrity, a lot of the issues surrounding the Biden family too.
Yeah, okay, so we agree. We agree that's corrupt. That it was corrupt that Biden did that, or the DOJ did not pursue investigation against the Biden family. Invoking that same thing for Trump, the same thing that you think is wrong. All of his okay now. So where's the principle? There is no principle. He has no principles.
Hunter Biden was investigated by Joe Biden's Department of was investigated by Joe Biden's Department of is
One of the things, so the answer is yes.
so again, he's saying yes, that's obviously corrupt. Donald Trump not being prosecuted or investigated by his Justice Department is obviously corrupt, even though Joe Biden was investigated by his Justice Department. So again, Shapiro's lying about this. And even if I were to grant him, to concede just for the sake of argument, it would still be less corrupt than Trump's Justice Department.
What I hear from the left is a constant drumbeat of accusation about President Trump, to which I acquiesce in part. But I find them utterly unconcerned with the same sort of issues arising.
That is irrelevant. Someone is corrupt. It is irrelevant. Criticizing corruption on their own side. It is. Corruption is corruption. Trump gets a pass because Democrats don't condemn corruption on their own side. If you are a principled person, I'm sure you have called out the corruption on the Democrat side. If you're a principled person, that you should you have absolutely no issues with them on your side. That's we'll fight corruption wherever we find it.
There is nothing remotely comparable from Joe Biden, Barack Obama, that comes close to the corruption that we're seeing from the Trump administration. What is he talking about?
They see President Trump as the person who's constantly violating the standard, the person
Because he is.
standard. I think President Trump stumbled
He did
on
not
the prone
stumble
body of
on
American
anything.
politics and said, this is a dead body. I see him much more as a coroner. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not some of both, meaning I think things can get worse under President Trump than they were heretofore. And I'm not going to deny that he's done things that I think are bad and wrong. I was very critical of his rhetoric between the election of 2020 and January. Both.
Any of these things, do you not see any of these things as disqualifying in a moral political sense? Like,
So I don't means in the sense that I did not support
you
him.
don't know what
primaries.
anything means. Now, all of a sudden, you're Jordan Peterson. Words have no meaning anymore.
that he would lose your faith and vote and support forever.
Well, I mean, the only way to lose my faith and support and vote forever would be for there to
don't share a concern that the period is potentially lays waste to those institutions.
I'm worried about it for sure, but I think that we may be worried about it from different angles. One of the things that I notice about democracies that sort of fall into crisis is, number one, obviously lack of institutional trust. But if you believe that if the other side wins, it's literally the end of the democracy, that is incredibly dangerous. That really is a problem, because then it suggests that if the other side wins, you're never going to get to vote again. Tyranny is upon you. And perhaps the only solution is a solution that sort of breaks the system.
But Ben, when the president of the United States tries to threaten people in Georgia to give him some votes, or he starts to talk about nationalizing the elections, all these things, whether it's January 6th, aren't these legitimate concerns? Is the worrier the problem, or the actual situation the problem?
Well, I mean, no, I think in some situations, the worrier is the problem. In some situations, it depends on the conclusion you're drawing. I think the worry about January 6th was justified because obviously the president between the election and January 6th was morally wrong and also legally wrong. But I also think that the guardrails held.
So someone is morally wrong, legally still going to vote for him, because it's like saying, you know what, I support criminals because the law is against crime and somehow criminals are going to be held accountable. So I think it's okay for people to go out and steal and rob and kill and do whatever, because the law is going to come after them. What kind of twisted logic is? You think Donald Trump is morally and legally wrong, but you think it's still okay for him to be president?
This is every time he mentions the guardrails, it pisses me off. So again, I want you to imagine a hypothetical, but let's use actual guardrails. What Ben Shapiro would be saying is, if Ben Shapiro's, I think he has young children. So let's imagine one of them is driving, right? A driving age or something like that. And let's say that they're in a car they're in the passenger seat with somebody a friend who's drunk driving. And Ben Shapiro, son or child, and their drunk friend who is driving, crash into a guardrail. And the guardrail holds. Okay? Would Ben Shapiro walk up to the driver of that car with his child in the passenger seat, just crashed into a guardrail, either again, because let's just say the driver's drunk? Would Ben Shapiro toss that driver a fresh set of keys to a new Ford F-150? Oh shit, you crashed that car. No harm, no foul. The guardrail's held. You know what? Here's a fresh set of keys to a different vehicle. Go on ahead. Feel free to drive. The guardrail's held. No, of course not. It's the dumbest fucking logic from somebody who is as intelligent as Shapiro.
He's not intelligent. He's not.
Is. It betrays a profound weakness. You're saying that you're tolerating a malicious actor.
He's just a fast-talking moron.
Because the guardrails held before, barely, and you're willing to give him another crack at it because they held last time? How the fuck does that compute?
And I think that, the notion that Democrats are sitting around worrying that there will never be another clean election, that's not true. And when Republicans say the same thing, Democrats are right to pounce on that. Democrats will say, President Trump will say, if we don't win this election, it's because it was stolen. But then I'll hear Democrats turn around and say very much the same thing about Republicans. And once both believe that if the other side wins, the election was stolen, then how are we supposed to ever share a polity together?
And this is what I said in a follow-up on Twitter, and quoting the excerpt from this transcript. What he just did was a false equivalence. Democrats say the same thing. Yes, some Democrats do say the same thing, but not the leadership of the party. They don't say that. As I point out, when Democrats lost elections in 2000, 2016, and 2024, there was no attempt by Democrats to steal those elections or stay in power unlawfully or deny the result. President Obama, in 2016, when Trump won, President Obama and Hillary Clinton conceded the race publicly. And Vice President Joe Biden didn't conspire with Hillary Clinton to deny Trump's victory with a fake collector scheme or an insurrection. Okay? Thus, again, displaying the objective moral superiority and constitutional superiority of the Democratic Party over the Republican Party. And in 2024, when Trump won again, Vice President Harris conceded publicly, and she didn't conspire with herself, because she was the vice president at the time, to prevent Trump from taking office. There was no insurrection, no fake elector scheme. So what the fuck has Ben talking about? And this
He doesn't
is what
know
it comes
what's
down to.
happening.
I think Ben Shapiro is smart enough to know he is betraying his principle.
Oh God, I'm tired of this guy. Ben isn't smart. He doesn't have principles. We'll leave it at that. That's all. He doesn't have any principles to stand on. He's just a weasel. He's going to weasel his way. He's going to, try to make excuses for Donald Trump, for the bad behavior of Donald Trump. And it's just sad that this is what it's come to. Anyway, that's all I have for today. Like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you some other time. Bye for now.